Hello, my name is DeLacy Taylor, CEO of Self-Care is Soul Care. I'm here to share with you today some of my experiences about work. This is my commentary on recognizing how I've lived to work instead of working to live. Have you ever put so much of your energy into work that isn't fulfilling? That you end up dragging yourself out of bed just to get into work? And at the same time, you put all your effort into doing a good job because you take pride in the work that you do? Have you given a lot of your time into creating something for the company that you work for? Something that was innovative or creative? Perhaps you tackled a problem in a different way, yet you weren't recognized or appreciated for the efforts that you put into solving this problem. Have you put a lot of time and energy into your career, yet your personal life and your family life suffered as a result of it? Have you neglected your hobbies, your creative endeavors, your joys, your passions, because you were so consumed and overwhelmed by the work that you have to do day to day just to make a living? Well, I know I have. In my most recent position, I worked for a quasi-governmental agency. I worked there for a number of years, putting a lot of time and energy into not only learning the business and making an impact, but I found myself putting a lot of time and energy into completing the job responsibilities of others, being a team player. I also worked on projects that had the potential to make significant organizational change. They were projects that were actually implemented, however, they did not receive the level of support that they needed to sustain the performance improvement momentum for the problem that they solved. I put in a lot of hours, a lot of unpaid overtime, and neglected my personal life, my family life, my passions, and my creative endeavors. I found myself living day to day without experiencing any type of happiness or joy. It wasn't that I was living paycheck to paycheck, because I had learned over time how to live below my means. And I always had been a workaholic and a diligent saver. There's a saying that you work hard, you play hard. Well, all I did was work hard, and rarely did I make time for play. Not only did my physical body suffer, but my mental, spiritual, and emotional self suffered as well. By ignoring my own needs and not respecting the time that I needed for self-care and self-love, my self-neglect was reflected back on me and displayed through the behavior and actions of others with whom I worked. I have recently come to recognize that I was a people pleaser, a perfectionist, and cared so much about producing exceptional work that I didn't prioritize making time to care for my physical, emotional, mental, and most importantly, spiritual needs. And that led to others not valuing me or my need for time off when I actually took it. After coming to this realization, I began to question, who am I doing all of this for? What exactly does working hard for others while being undervalued mean? When will I achieve a sense of fulfillment from the work that I am doing? Where do I feel that I am my most authentic self? Why am I doing the work that I am doing, and what sense of joy do I get out of it? How are my values showing up in the work that I am doing? As I contemplated these questions, I examined my career. I realized that with my most recent position, I often attended meeting after meeting where there were consistent discussions about the same problems that needed solving over and over again. I realized no matter how much we talked about it, the situation didn't improve. The focus was always on the latest fire that needed to be put out. I observed that several other team members didn't have the same work ethic that I had, and most did just enough to continue to collect a paycheck. Well, I am a problem solver, and I signed up for and was there to make a difference. My aha moment that I was no longer in a position that resonated with me occurred during a meeting where managers for various locations and departments were asked about their location's poor performance. I realized that the responses that were given were the same responses that I heard for the same questions to the same problems when I started the job several years ago. After becoming aware of the repetitive nature to solve the same problem, I paused to think about that. I realized that every time we had this meeting, we discussed the same things over and over again, with the same talking points being used each time. It was literally the same thing over and over again. And then I realized I'm stuck in a loop. I'm in a never-ending Groundhog Day scenario, yet I felt as if I was the only one who was putting in a lot of work and effort towards resolving the problems. The day I realized this, I felt as if I had just woken up. I realized that this is no longer the job for me, and that this was a waste of my precious time and energy. Yes, I was able to maintain my financial house, but I was neglecting so much of my personal life that it felt as if I was working simply for the sake of working. I also often didn't feel appreciated by my managers or colleagues. After processing this, I realized that not only was I a high performer at a job that I didn't enjoy, but I realized that I wasn't happy at the job and that it interfered with my personal life. What I began to learn was that no matter what I did, no matter how much I was able to save the organization money by identifying inconsistencies in how staff were being paid, as well as identifying some bad behaviors that led to unsafe activities, I began to feel as if I was not appreciated for identifying these issues that needed to be corrected. As I stated earlier, not everyone had the same level of work ethic as I had, and perhaps others took the deficiencies that I identified as a slight against them. I was just doing my job, and like I said before, I take pride in what I do, and I was just doing the best job that I could possibly do. As I began to realize that my best was no longer good enough, I decided to take some time to myself. I actually began taking my lunches and using that time to meditate. I was one of those who would either work through my lunch or eat my lunch at my desk. However, after my epiphany, I decided that I no longer wanted to do that. I wanted to use my lunch and break time to allow myself time to disconnect, take a break, and think about how I could translate my skills into a new position that resonated with my soul. I began to use that time for myself as dedicated self-care. I brought a light and delicious lunch and took my time enjoying it. I also used that time for professional development and began to listen to podcasts that provided different perspectives. During my lunchtime, I realized how important self-care is and that tuning into myself is critical for my well-being. I also often use that time to go for walks, to clear my head, get some fresh air, and to just get moving, because working at a desk job where you're sitting at the computer all day, hunched over, well, everyone knows that's not the healthiest thing. During that allotted time where I wasn't being paid anyway, I decided to reclaim that time for myself. On those days where I went for a walk during lunch, I listened to nature or classical music and instrumentals so that I could snap myself out of this Groundhog Day scenario for the sake of my own happiness. During my walk, I recognized that I began to reconnect with myself and the divine. I began processing my feelings and observing myself and my experiences so that I can begin to identify a strategy on how to move into a happier work situation. I began to look for other opportunities, both inside and outside the organization. However, on several occasions, I received intuitive hits that I was being blocked from some of these opportunities. Upon this realization, I decided that I needed a break. I needed to reset in order to rediscover myself and get back to the core of who I am. I began to use my vacation time and completely disconnect from work so that I could fully connect with myself. I used that time to reflect, to journal, and to meditate. I restarted my yoga practice and began working more in my garden. Over time, I began to recognize myself again in the mirror. I started feeling as if I was beginning to reclaim those things that gave me joy and happiness. I came to the conclusion that I had been living to work instead of working to live, and that I needed more work-life balance. During the pandemic, I felt as if my work-life balance was more in harmony. However, over time, teleworking was reduced, and going back into the office became an organizational requirement, even though all of my work could be done remotely. Even after returning to work in the office, we still had meetings on Teams or on Zoom, and I was acutely aware that I could have easily had these same meetings remotely from home. During my walks and my moments of reflection, I realized I wanted to identify how I could monetize my skills and work for myself. Thankfully, I had built up a rainy day fund, which was a valuable lesson that I had learned after being laid off a few times in the past. Since there had been numerous threats of layoffs in the job that I currently was in, I decided that now was the time to focus on doing work that I actually enjoy. During my time off, the more I engaged in self-care activities, the more I identified ways to monetize my skills. I decided to focus on translating my skills toward building a business. In the past, I often felt guilty for taking time off from work because there was so much going on at work that I felt I needed to be connected at all times. However, during my time of rediscovering myself, I realized that my place of work will not shut down because I wasn't there. Therefore, I decided to completely disconnect from work and to not think about work at all. I used my time off to only focus on myself. I began to rediscover myself and realized that I needed to make some significant changes. Please join me next week for a continuation of my story. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to subscribe to my channel. Also, hit the notification bell to be alerted of new videos. If you're still watching, I'd like to thank you for listening to my story. If anything I shared resonated with you, let me know in the comments down below. I'd like to leave you with this quote from Dr. Jean Shinoda Bolen. When you recover or discover something that nourishes your soul and brings joy, care enough about yourself to make room for it in your life. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you can find ways to better care for yourself. Thank you for watching. Take care and take self-care.